Criminal history is filled with stories of terrible acts that changed lives forever. Though most murderers are caught with careful investigations, a few of them have managed to escape the clutches of the law. Hello and welcome to Maya's reality channel, where we bring you compelling true crime stories. From unsolved mysteries to notorious criminals, we leave no stone unturned as we navigate the dark corridors of real-life crimes. So don't forget to give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more. 1. The Bloody Benders. In the 1870s, Labette County in Kansas was a tranquil settlement nestled along an ancient Native American route. Travelers passing through the Midwest had the option of staying at a modest wayside inn, a dimly lit establishment operated by an immigrant German family known as the Benders. John Bender, his wife Elvira, their son John Jr., and their daughter Kate. However, those who sought refuge at the Benders Inn found themselves entangled in a sinister web of horror. During the early summer of 1871, the lifeless body of a gentleman named Mr. Jones was discovered in Drum Creek, not far from the Wayside Inn. His skull was crushed, and his throat slit, leaving a gruesome mystery in the air. The Drum Creek's owner was labeled a suspect due to his proximity to the murder, but the true perpetrator remained elusive. Several months later, in February 1872, the prairie near Osage Township became the haunting grounds for a macabre discovery. Two bodies, their throats slashed and skulls crushed with a blunt object, reflected the fate of Mr. Jones. This grisly repetition aroused the curiosity of the locals, leading them to question the sinister secrets hidden within Labette County. The trail, once a mere pathway for travelers, had gained a notorious reputation as a place of danger. By 1873, reports of missing people who had passed through the area spread far and wide, prompting many to avoid it altogether. Vigilance committees emerged, but instead of maintaining peace, they wrongly accused innocent men of being responsible for the disappearances. Some would be released by the authorities, while others fled the county to escape the committee's suspicions. As investigators delved into the mysteries surrounding the bodies discovered near Osage Township, a chilling revelation emerged. Both victims had, unfortunately, stayed at the Wayside Inn before meeting their gruesome end. The systematic manner in which these murders were carried out hinted at a darkness that permeated the seemingly ordinary inn, leaving the community in fear and the investigators with a daunting task ahead. The Benders' only daughter, Kate Bender, an alleged healer with an outgoing personality and striking looks, often attracted male suitors to the Wayside Inn. Within the confines of a small room, inn guests sat beside a canvas wall that separated them from the rest of the family. While distracted by Kate's company, Mr. John Bender Sr. or his son would emerge from behind the canvas, wielding a heavy blunt instrument, likely a sledgehammer, to strike the unsuspecting visitor. Following the brutal assault, Kate or her mother would step forward to ensure the victim's demise. If the unfortunate soul still clung to life, they would finish the job. Wealthier guests, especially those with money or valuable horses, were particularly susceptible to these sinister fates. Subsequently, the lifeless bodies were callously tossed through a trapdoor into a backroom cellar where they awaited disposal. Some met their final resting place out on the prairie or in Drum Creek. As time passed, the Benders even began burying their victims in the orchards surrounding their property. Throughout the ominous years of 1872 and 1873, the Benders continued their murderous spree. Ben Brown from Howard County, Kansas, fell prey to their malevolent intentions, his substantial sum of money leading to a gruesome end in the orchards. Another victim, W.F. McCrotty, arrived at the Wayside Inn in 1872 with a wagon and a team of horses, a possession the family deemed valuable. McCrotty, however, never left the establishment, becoming yet another haunting addition to the Benders' list of victims. In December 1872, George Longcore arrived at the inn with his infant daughter, seeking to relocate from Independence, Kansas, to settle in Iowa. Carrying a substantial sum of $1,900, the pair never made it to their intended destination. Instead, they became victims of the Benders' sinister plots, buried in the orchard alongside other unfortunate souls. Shockingly, it later came to light that George Longcore's young daughter had been buried alive. Around the same time, Johnny Boyle met his untimely demise, likely for the sole purpose of claiming his horse and saddle. His lifeless body was carelessly tossed down the Benders' dreadful abyss. These murders continued into 1873, claiming the lives of at least a dozen travelers, if not more. However, one of these killings would set in motion an investigation that would finally put an end to the macabre hospitality offered at the Wayside Inn. In the spring of 1873, Dr. William Henry York, a friend of George Longcore, embarked on a journey to Kansas along the same route taken by the ill-fated Longcore family. Concerned about his missing friend, Dr. York passed through Osage Township in mid-March 1873, never to be seen again. The mysterious disappearance prompted a comprehensive search led by Dr. York's brothers, prominent individuals in the region. Colonel Alexander York, a Civil War veteran, lawyer, and member of the Kansas State Senate, arrived at the Wayside Inn on March 28, 1873. The Benders confirmed that Dr. York had stayed with them, but suggested he had left the next day, possibly falling victim to an attack on the trail. Colonel York, willing to consider this possibility, continued his investigation. However, suspicion had already taken root among the local residents of Osage Township, who harbored doubts about the enigmatic Bender family. These concerns reached the members of the search party, fueled by a lady's account of being chased by Mrs. Elvira Bender with a knife when attempting to visit the inn. On April 3, Colonel York returned to confront the Benders, who vehemently denied the accusations. Elvira, in a fit of rage, accused the woman of being the witch who had cursed her coffee, ordering the colonel and his men to leave. This confrontation revealed that Elvira understood and spoke far more English than previously believed. The men accompanying Colonel York were convinced of the Benders' guilt and wanted to arrest them, as well as search their property. However, Colonel York insisted on finding evidence of wrongdoing before taking any action. The investigation hung in the balance, with the true horrors of the Wayside Inn yet to be fully exposed. Before leaving, Kate asked Colonel York to return alone the following Friday night, claiming that her clairvoyant abilities would help locate his missing brother. Around the same time, rumors spread in neighboring communities, pointing fingers at Osage Township for the mysterious disappearances. To restore order, Colonel York convened a public meeting attended by 75 locals, including John Bender and his son, John Bender Jr. It was decided to obtain a search warrant to investigate every homestead between Big Hill Creek and Drum Creek, encompassing all homesteads in Osage Township. 3 days later, a farmer named Billy Tall noticed the abandoned inn and unfed farm animals, reporting it to the town trustee. Volunteers were called to search the Bender property, but bad weather delayed the commencement of the search. When the search party, led by Colonel York, finally reached the Bender residence, they found it deserted. A quick inspection revealed signs of a hasty departure, including blood residue in the cellar and freshly dug holes in the orchard. Colonel York instructed his men to dig, unveiling a gruesome graveyard of the Benders' former guests, including the body of Colonel York's brother. Several hammers, including a sledgehammer, were discovered in the house. Subsequent investigations revealed that the Benders were not who they claimed to be. John Bender Sr.'s real name was John Flickinger, his supposed son's real name was John Gebhardt, and Elvira's name was Almira Mark Griffith. Kate, believed to be their daughter, was actually Eliza Griffith. Despite this revelation, the culprits had already escaped. Days later, their abandoned wagon was found outside the town of Thayer, 12 miles away from the Wayside Inn. Further investigations indicated that they had headed southwest, using trains and various transport methods. The younger Benders possibly went to Texas and from there to New Mexico, while John Bender Sr. and Elvira seemed to have taken a different route to Missouri. Colonel York and the governor of Kansas offered large cash rewards for their apprehension, but the trail had gone cold. The fate of the Bloody Benders became shrouded in Western myth, with numerous supposed sightings reported all over the country in the years that followed. Despite these sightings, the substantial rewards offered in 1873 for their arrest remained unclaimed, leaving the question of whether the Bloody Benders would ever face justice unanswered. Many in Kansas wondered about the elusive and notorious family who had terrorized the region with their gruesome deeds. 2. The Redhead Murders. Between 1978 and 1992, the bodies of nearly a dozen red-headed women and girls were discovered abandoned along major highways in various locations across the United States. The grim series of events began on February 13, 1983, when two elderly West Virginians driving along Route 250 in Wetzel County made a chilling discovery. Initially mistaking it for a mannequin, they decided to investigate further. To their horror, they found the lifeless body of a white female lying in the snow. Authorities arrived and determined that the body had been recently placed there, leading them to believe that she had died 2 days prior at a different location. Two significant factors supported this theory. Firstly, snow covered the ground but not the corpse, suggesting it hadn't been there for an extended period. Secondly, tire tracks and footprints were visible in the snow, leading away from the body. Although the cause of death remained undetermined, investigators suspected strangulation or suffocation. Importantly, there was no evidence of sexual assault. The woman was estimated to be between 35 and 45 years old, well-groomed, with auburn-colored hair, a distinctive detail that would soon become crucial to the unfolding investigation. On September 16, 1984, another tragic incident unfolded near West Memphis, Arkansas. A female with strawberry blonde hair was discovered lying beside Interstate 40, strangled to death. All that remained on her lifeless body was a sweater. Authorities suspected she might have been murdered after leaving a truck stop, possibly while hitchhiking. Despite the ongoing investigation, her identity remained elusive for nearly a year. In June of the following year, a couple from Florida who had temporarily housed the victim recognized her. The victim was identified as 28-year-old Lisa Nichols. As investigators delved into her past, they uncovered a troubling fact. Lisa had been at odds with her family, which contributed to her remaining unidentified for 9 months. On New Year's Day, January 1, 1985, another grim discovery took place along Interstate 75 near Jellicoe, Tennessee, in Campbell County. A rapidly decomposing corpse, fully clothed in jeans, a shirt, and a tan pullover, was found. Freckles and burn marks were visible on the woman's body, and intriguingly, she had short red hair, similar to the previous victims. At this point, authorities began to consider that the similarities were more than mere coincidences. Many years later, the Shelby County Sheriff's Office identified the victim through fingerprints as Tina Marie McKinney, who was 21 at the time of her death. The unfolding pattern of red-haired female victims along highways raised concerns among investigators, hinting at a potentially sinister connection that would unravel in the course of the investigation. The disturbing series of murders persisted, and along the side of Route 78 in DeSoto County, Mississippi, another victim was discovered on January 24, 1985. The unidentified woman, later referred to as Jane Doe, was found wearing a pinkish-orange pullover and jeans. Notably, her shoes were missing, possibly taken by the killer as a trophy. Her unmistakable feature was her reddish to strawberry blonde hair. The cause of her death was determined to be strangulation, and there were indications of possible sexual assault. Police believed she was connected to the other murders due to the shared characteristic of her hair color. On March 31, 1985, in Pleasant View, Cheatham County, Tennessee, the skeletal remains of another white female with red hair were found on the side of Interstate 24. The victim, identified as Michelle Lavon Inman, was believed to have died between 4 and 5 months earlier from an unknown cause. Investigators suspected her case was linked to the ongoing series of murders, An autopsy report suggested she was between the ages of 31 and 40 at the time of her death. On April 1, 1985, along Route 25 in Knox County, Kentucky, the body of a young white female was discovered in an old White Admiral refrigerator, likely from the 1950s, adorned with a decal spelling, Superwoman. The victim, later identified as Epsie Pigram, was believed to be 24 to 35 years old at the time of her death. She had died by suffocation, and police determined she had been dead for a few days before her discovery. Over 500 people attended her funeral in a heartwarming display of community support. Yet another tragic murder occurred in Tennessee on April 14, 1985. The body of an unidentified woman with brownish blonde hair and red highlights was found in Greene County. Her cause of death was determined to be severe blunt force trauma and possible stab wounds. The woman was also found to be 6 to 8 weeks pregnant, but had miscarried before being murdered. Authorities estimated her age to be between 14 and 20 years old at the time of her death. Notably, she had fillings in her teeth, indicating she had received care at some point in her life. Many years later, the body was identified as that of Elizabeth Lamott, a native of New Hampshire, bringing a tragic end to her story and shedding light on the devastating pattern of these unsolved murders. Near the state border of Alabama, in Rising Fawn, Dade County, Georgia, another victim with red hair was discovered. She was found wearing jeans, a dark blue pullover shirt, and black shoes, along with 2 pieces of jewelry, a golden necklace and a ring with a heart-shaped pattern. Investigators determined that she had been strangled to death and sexually assaulted. The woman's likely status as a runaway or hitchhiker added to the complexity of the case. As the investigation unfolded, several other deaths potentially linked to the Redhead murders were discovered in various states, including Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Ohio, Texas, and North Carolina. However, inconsistencies in these cases did not align with the known victims of the Redhead murders. Towards the end of 1985, 2 suspects emerged during the investigation. A 37-year-old truck driver who had attacked and attempted to strangle a woman with reddish hair, and a 32-year-old trucker in Pennsylvania, who was being interrogated after kidnapping and raping a young woman in Indiana. Unfortunately, both suspects were dismissed, and investigators found no other leads in the case. The elusive killer remained at large, leaving the tragic Redhead murders unsolved. The investigation faced challenges, and the community was left grappling with the haunting mystery surrounding these heinous crimes. 3. The Axemen of New Orleans. The Axemen of New Orleans terrorized the city with a series of brutal attacks between 1918 and 1919, resulting in at least 6 deaths and 6 injuries. As the name implies, the weapon of choice was often an axe, frequently belonging to the victims, although a straight razor was used in some instances. A peculiar pattern emerged, with most victims being Italian immigrants, sparking speculation about potential ethnic motivations or even connections to the mafia. However, these theories were never substantiated. One such gruesome incident occurred on May 23, 1918, at the home of Joseph Maggio, an Italian grocer, and his wife Catherine. As they slept, an intruder broke in, slashing their throats with a straight razor and then bludgeoning their heads with an axe, possibly to mask the true cause of death. Joseph survived momentarily but succumbed to his injuries shortly after being discovered by his brothers, Jake and Andrew. The murderer left behind his bloody clothes in the apartment, suggesting a quick change of attire before fleeing the scene. In the early hours of June 27, 1918, Louis Bezumer and his mistress Harriet Lowe fell victim to a similar attack in the rear quarters of Bezumer's grocery at Dorgenoy and La Hart Streets. Bezumer suffered a hatchet blow to the right temple, causing a potential skull fracture, while Lowe was hacked over the left ear, leaving him unconscious at the scene. The gruesome discovery was made by John Zanka, a bakery wagon driver making a routine delivery, finding the couple immersed in their own blood with severe head injuries. On August 10, 1918, the Axemen struck again, targeting Joseph Romano, an elderly man living with his nieces, Pauline and Mary Bruno. The sisters were awakened by a disturbance in the adjacent room where their uncle resided. Upon entering, they found Romano with severe head injuries, inflicted by the assailant who was fleeing the scene. The sisters described the attacker as a dark-skinned, heavy-set man in a dark suit and slouched hat. Although seriously injured, Romano managed to walk to the ambulance upon its arrival, but succumbed to severe head trauma 2 days later. Despite ransacking the home, the assailant left without stealing anything. Authorities discovered a bloody axe in the backyard and identified a chiseled panel on the back door. The Romano murder plunged the city into chaos, instilling widespread fear of an impending Axeman attack. The Axeman continued to evade capture and identification, leaving his reign of terror unresolved. On March 13, 1919, a letter believed to be from the Axeman was published, announcing his intent to strike at 15 minutes past midnight on March 19. In a peculiar twist, he vowed to spare places where jazz bands were playing. The announcement caused a citywide uproar, leading to packed dance halls and numerous jazz performances on the specified night. Astonishingly, there were no reported murders on March 19, as the community collectively embraced the protective power of jazz against the Axemen's deadly intentions. The abrupt and mysterious end to the Axemen's crimes left the people of New Orleans unsettled and fearful. The true identity and motives of the Axemen remain shrouded in mystery, making it an enduring enigma in the annals of criminal history. 4. The Smiley Face Murders. Counting from 1997, hundreds of accidental drownings were reported in the United States. However, many of them share disturbing details and similar patterns of a possible murder scene. On a cold evening on December 15, 2016, a man named Dakota James made a disturbing distress call to his friend Shelley. In his call, he mentioned that he was lost and didn't know where he was. Concerned, Shelley immediately got in her car and headed towards North Pittsburgh, the location James had mentioned. However, upon checking his location on her phone, Shelley realized that he was nowhere near North Pittsburgh. James was actually in South Pittsburgh and seemed to be in a distressed mental state as he continued to plead with Shelley to find him. During the call, James expressed that he was cold, scared, and had no idea how he ended up alone, walking in the middle of the street. Shelley rushed to his location, which would take about 10 minutes, only to find James stumbling out of a hotel. He was heading in the direction of a black SUV that was facing the wrong way in the wrong lane. As James walked closer to the vehicle, Shelley pulled up and screamed his name. James stopped in his tracks and turned to her. He walked to her car and got in just as the SUV sped off into the night. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Dakota James' distress call and the peculiar encounter with the black SUV would later become crucial elements in the unsettling pattern of accidental drownings that raised suspicions of foul play in the United States. James was confused, crying, and overwhelmed with everything that was going on. He explained to Shelley that he had gone out to the bars at 7:15 p.m. with some coworkers, but remembered nothing after that. Despite his disorientation, his words were clear, and Shelley noticed that when he walked to the car, he walked in a straight line. It was evident that Dakota James had blanked out for 4 hours, but it was clear to Shelley that he was not drunk. Rather, it appeared that he had been drugged. Relieved to be in the car and safe, James didn't wish to talk about the situation anymore, and the conversation with Shelley went cold. Dakota James vanished 5 weeks later, following a similar night of bar hopping with his coworkers. It took 40 days before his body was discovered in the Ohio River, revealing the presence of GHB, commonly known as the date rape drug, in his bloodstream. Surprisingly, his body appeared well preserved despite being found in the water, and there were marks on his neck indicative of strangulation. Official conclusions labeled James's death as an accidental drowning, asserting he fell off the Roberto Clemente Bridge while heading home from the bar. However, the discovery of 11 smiley faces graffitied on the bridge raised suspicions. This discovery left many uneasy, especially considering the drugs found in his system, Shelley's earlier account, and additional evidence like a credit card transaction made 2 days after his supposed disappearance. The excellent condition of his body further challenged the belief that he had been in the water for 40 days. The Dakota James case exemplifies a broader pattern seen in numerous instances across the United States, where cases initially perceived as clear-cut murders are dismissed and attributed to accidental drownings by authorities. In a gripping tale of intrigue, 2 seasoned New York detectives, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Doerr, stumbled upon a chilling revelation rooted in their collective 40 years of investigative wisdom. Delving into the depths of unsolved mysteries, they discerned an unsettling pattern linking a multitude of questionable accidental drownings. The victims, predominantly white males, shared common traits: college-aged, athletic, intelligent, and popular. Their vanishing acts from bars or parties often perplexed investigators, as they displayed signs of intoxication despite minimal alcohol consumption. A troubling discovery emerged. Many tested positive for the date rape drug GHB, and their lifeless bodies surfaced in bodies of water days, weeks, or months later, bearing injuries inconsistent with mere drownings. Detective Kevin Gannon's journey into this dark pattern commenced in 1997, catalyzed by the perplexing case of Patrick McNeil. Despite compelling evidence pointing to foul play, McNeil's demise was hastily cataloged as just another accidental drowning. Since that pivotal moment, an alarming tally of around 300 analogous cases has unfolded across the United States, primarily on the East Coast. The incidents tend to cluster within condensed timeframes, casting shadows of suspicion on the circumstances and hinting at potential connections. Gannon put forth a riveting theory. These victims were drugged during their social escapades, abducted, possibly subjected to torture, and ultimately met their demise before being callously disposed of in nearby bodies of water. He postulates that a clandestine group of serial killers, operating in various cities, orchestrates these malevolent deeds, a nefarious network complicating law enforcement's efforts to untangle and solve these heinous crimes. The eerie presence of smiley face graffiti consistently adorning crime scenes lends credence to Gannon's theory, suggesting it might serve as a chilling signature mark of these elusive killers. Despite the theory's apparent viability, the intricate organization's complexity and its widespread geographical reach pose formidable challenges for law enforcement. The recurring use of smiley face graffiti emerges as a macabre tag, aligning with the ominous tradition among serial killers. While the theory stands as a plausible narrative, lingering questions persist about law enforcement's seeming reluctance or inability to fully acknowledge and address this disconcerting pattern. The reluctance of authorities to acknowledge or investigate the purported smiley face murder theory may stem from various reasons. On one hand, they might genuinely believe that there is no substantial evidence or pattern indicative of foul play. On the other hand, the possibility of a cover-up cannot be dismissed. Admitting to the existence of a large-scale group of murderers operating for years could tarnish the image of law enforcement, implying a multitude of past errors. Acknowledging such a group's presence might instigate public panic, leading to a perception that serial killers are on a rampant spree across the United States. The logical implications of these scenarios provide a plausible rationale for authorities to keep this theory under wraps. A significant challenge to the smiley face murder theory lies in understanding the motive behind these alleged killings. The victims, predominantly white, college-aged, and accomplished, exhibit no clear pattern that would explain their targeted victimization. Envy killings have been theorized, attributing the murders to resentment toward the victim's intelligence and athleticism. However, the lack of familiarity with the victim's popularity in their local social structures makes this motive less plausible. The absence of a discernible motive has long hindered progress in solving these cases. Another perplexing aspect is the smiley face graffiti itself. Critics argue that smiley faces are common forms of graffiti and are not exclusive to this particular pattern. There are no established rules dictating the proximity of the smiley face to the crime scene, allowing for potential manipulation of facts. Detective Kevin Gannon's findings could be subject to interpretation, with the location of the graffiti not necessarily correlating directly with the crime. The notion of a serial killer tagging crime scenes with a smiley face adds a chilling layer of intrigue to the cases, contributing to their notoriety. However, the very presence of smiley faces creates a paradox, with this characteristic both captivating the public and raising doubts about the veracity of the theory. While the sinister symbolism of the smiley face enhances the mysterious allure of the cases, it also introduces uncertainties that impede a clearer understanding of the true nature of these deaths. 5. The West Mesa Bone Collector. The West Mesa murders involved the tragic killings of 11 women whose remains were discovered in 2009 in the desert on the West Mesa of Albuquerque, New Mexico, USA. The unsettling chain of events began in February 2009 when a woman, out walking her dog in West Mesa, Albuquerque, stumbled upon a horrifying discovery: an embedded human bone in the elevated landmass. Upon police arrival, this bone unraveled a grim truth. A mass grave containing 11 bodies was sprawled across the mesa, all victims being female. The perpetrator, known as the West Mesa Bone Collector, remains at large to this day. Subsequent investigations revealed that between 2001 and 2005, this serial killer took the lives of 11 women, leaving their remains buried on the outskirts of Albuquerque. The case stands out as one of the most horrific in the city and possibly the entire state of New Mexico. Law enforcement initially promised the victims' families that solving these murders was a top priority. Determined to bring justice, investigators formed a skilled team of detectives, enlisted FBI profilers, and collaborated with law enforcement agencies across the state. Their goal was to piece together the circumstances surrounding the discovery of the 11 women's bones, uncovering the details of their deaths, and identifying the person responsible. All victims of the West Mesa Bone Collector were Hispanic women aged between 15 and 32. They were suspected to be involved in the Albuquerque drug scene and worked as prostitutes. The remains of these 11 women, along with an unborn child, were not found in a single mass grave, but scattered beneath dry sand, exposed to the harsh sun, and surrounded by tumbleweeds. Recovering and identifying the bodies took considerable time, revealing that many of the victims had been missing for years. The investigation concluded with the identification of all 11 women, marking a somber chapter in Albuquerque's history. The West Mesa murders, involving the discovery of 11 women's remains in the desert in 2009, raised disturbing questions. Officially deemed homicides, the medical examiner and forensic experts faced an unusual challenge, being unable to determine the cause of death for these women. With no witnesses, virtually no forensic evidence at the burial site, and only their shared grave and high-risk lifestyles connecting the victims, the case presented an eerie mystery. Despite extensive efforts, law enforcement has struggled to identify the elusive West Mesa Bone Collector. However, a couple of suspects have emerged, adding a twist to the investigation. Lorenzo Montoya, with a suspicious criminal history, lived near the burial site and had a violent encounter with a prostitute in 1999. Montoya met a grisly end in 2006, coinciding with a temporary halt in the West Mesa murders, suggesting a potential connection. Joseph Blea, another suspect, drew attention due to a collection of jewelry and women's underwear found in his home. His stalking habits and previous arrests for indecent exposure added to suspicions. Blea's ex-wife even contacted the police, expressing her belief that he was the killer, although nothing has definitively linked him to the crimes. Currently serving time for raping a 13-year-old, Blea had a history of attacking victims with a knife. Scott Lee Kimball, a released convict turned FBI informant, embarked on a killing spree in 2002, landing him back in prison. Though accused of additional murders, including the West Mesa killings, no direct connections to the victims have been established, and Kimball denies being the killer. In 2010, private investigator George Walker received messages claiming to know the identity of the West Mesa bone collector. Suspected to be from the killer, law enforcement has been unable to verify the information's reliability. The mystery persists, leaving investigators grappling with the challenge of solving a case marked by an elusive perpetrator and a complex web of potential suspects. In 2007, 2 years before the West Mesa murders came to light, an Albuquerque reporter made a chilling discovery. The city's lone missing persons detective had compiled a list of 16 missing prostitutes between 2001 and 2007. A troubling sign that often points to a serial killer. However, to the police, it appeared as a collection of missing individuals, often dismissed as the less dead. When the West Mesa murders were uncovered, 9 of the missing women were identified in the burial site, but the fate of the remaining 7 remains unknown, raising the possibility of additional burial sites created by the killer. Albuquerque police, officially investigating the West Mesa killings, also known as the 118th Street homicides, are confronted with new theories suggesting the existence of a second burial site. However, with no concrete leads, the case has gone cold. The elusive killer may be deceased, living freely in New Mexico, or continuing their gruesome activities elsewhere in America, potentially establishing more burial sites across the country. The mysteries surrounding the West Mesa murders still stand today, leaving law enforcement with unanswered questions and a compelling need for resolution. All right, guys, that wraps up our video for today. If you found this informative, please do well to give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and watch out for more